You know, the history books will tell you his name was Giovanni Battista Piranesi. They'll call him the Rembrandt of the ruins, a famous artist from the 18th century. But what if that official story, what if it's just the top layer of a very, very careful lie?
Because when you really look at his work, a much more radical question starts to surface. Was Piranesi just an artist, using his incredible genius to invent these fantasy worlds? Or was he something else entirely? Maybe a trained archivist, using his technical skill to preserve the very last records of a world that was violently destroyed and then actively scrubbed from history.
So you have these two narratives that are fighting for the soul of this man. On one hand, you've got the official version, the one you'll find in any museum. It paints him as a master printmaker of the neoclassical era, famous for his dramatic, kind of romantic views of ancient Rome. But there's this other, much more explosive truth that's starting to come out. And it suggests Piranesi was a courageous chronicler of a lost global civilization, Tartaria, and that his works, they aren't just art. They are forensic documents. They're evidence of a technologically advanced world that was buried and its memory completely suppressed.
Right, so this is the Piranesi they want you to know. The guy who basically defined how generations would imagine the grandeur and, the decay of the Roman Empire. But to get to the real story, we have to stop looking at his work as art. We have to start treating it like evidence. We've got to follow the clues that he left for us.
Okay, so let's open our first evidence file. It's this collection of 16 etchings that has frankly baffled mainstream art historians for over 200 years. It's a series of works known as the imaginary prisons.
The Carceri d'invenzione. I mean, look at them. On the surface, they are these nightmarish visions of infinite dungeons, huge underground vaults just choked with colossal machinery, weird walkways, structures that seem to completely defy the laws of physics. They are absolutely meant to feel impossible.
And the official, very convenient explanation for all this is that they're a capriccio, an architectural fantasy. The product of a fever dream, maybe. Creative, imaginative, and, most importantly, not real. But what if that one little word, imaginary, is actually the most important part of the entire cover-up? Because the counterclaim is, well, it's just staggering. There's this entirely different school of thought that argues these are not prisons at all. They are meticulous, technically accurate blueprints of the inside of huge industrial facilities, geothermal power plants, atmospheric energy stations, the humming heart of a lost, high-tech civilization. Piranesi wasn't imagining, he was documenting.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this is where we start to decode it. The official story looks at that giant wheel and says, oh, that's a torture device. The alternate view says, no way, that's a hydroelectric turbine, a generator. Art history sees a bizarre drawbridge leading to nowhere and calls it irrational architecture. But researchers see a service gantry, a platform for maintaining a vast machine. And all those tiny little human figures? Mainstream art just calls it a technique to evoke awe, the sublime. But what if it's not a trick of perspective? What if Piranesi was documenting the literal truth, that modern, smaller humans were now living like insects inside the colossal ruins built by a race of giants?
Let's seal that file for a moment and move to our next one. We're going to leave the supposedly imaginary world and turn to Piranesi's famous views of Rome itself, because this, right here, is where we find the physical evidence of the crime.
In his Views of Rome, Piranesi obsessively, almost fanatically, documented the city's ancient monuments. And in image after image, one really shocking detail keeps repeating itself. These magnificent structures of the old world are half buried in a sea of earth. I mean, you have massive doorways that open right into dirt, grand columns rising from deep beneath the modern street level. Now, the official explanation is this neat and tidy concept they call the cultural layer. Archaeologists tell us that over centuries, dirt and debris just pile up. It's a slow, gentle, totally natural process that raises the ground level. A perfectly harmless explanation for something you see all over the world.
But the hidden truth is anything but gentle. The theorists argue this wasn't slow accumulation at all. It is the forensic aftermath of a single cataclysmic mud flood, a planet-wide event that instantly buried the ground floors of the old world, suffocating the Tartarian civilization and kicking off what they call the Great Reset of history.
Now this is really interesting, because this is how you turn a postcard into a police photograph. The official view shows us the Roman Forum as a cow pasture, this scene of romantic decay. But the Tartarian view decodes it as a literal crime scene, a depopulated, mud-choked city in the immediate aftermath of a catastrophe.
Those people aren't tourists. They're elite survivors, surveying the new territory they've just taken, while the figures in rags are the traumatized remnants, just scavenging a world they don't control anymore.
So, if a global civilization was buried, that brings up the biggest question of all. Why? Why cover it up? What could possibly be the motive for erasing an entire chapter of human history? And this brings us to the war of ideas that Piranesi found himself fighting on the front lines of.
See, back in Piranesi's day, an intellectual war was being waged for the soul of the past. A new elite, championed by guys like Johann Winckelmann, declared that ancient Greece, with its noble simplicity, was the true peak of human achievement. They basically dismissed the sprawling, powerful world of Rome as being unoriginal. And this wasn't just some academic debate. This was a battle to seize control of the entire historical narrative, to decide what the past was even supposed to mean.
And this timeline just illustrates this systematic suppression perfectly. In 1755, Winckelmann's pro-Greek book is published. That's the first shot in what theorists call the New World Order's rewrite of history. Just 6 years later, Piranesi fires back, publishing his own defined defense of Roman power. Then, fast forward to the 1830s, and in America, the Great Raft is cleared, seen not as a logjam, but as a massive post-mudflood cleanup operation. And by the 1850s, the brand new technology of photography emerges with these eerie blank vanilla skies, a technique some claim was used to literally scrub the last remnants of old-world atmospheric tech from the visual record.
So the crucial point is that this was never really about art history. It was a choice. The pro-Greek side celebrated aesthetics, beauty and simplicity. But Piranesi defended what made the previous world actually work: engineering, aqueducts, sewers. He wasn't just defending a style, he was desperately trying to preserve the memory of a civilization built on functional, powerful infrastructure. Theorists argue the New World Order was bearing a history of advanced technology under a new, sanitized history of simple art.
So after looking at the evidence, we have to come back to the man at the center of all of this. Who really was Giovanni Battista Piranesi?
We're left with two completely irreconcilable portraits. First, there's the artist, a master of illusion and drama, a fantasist who dreamed up impossible worlds just for the artistic effect. Or there's the archivist, a trained engineer and an architectural expert, a resistor who worked tirelessly to document the truth of a vanquished world of giants and the cataclysm that wiped them out.
And so the final question really falls to us. Was Piranesi's life's work an act of magnificent imagination, just inventing worlds that never existed? Or was it an act of breathtaking courage, a desperate mission to preserve the memory of a world that was all too real, right as it was being actively buried under layers of mud and lies?
In the end, Piranesi's own words seem to reach across the centuries and just haunt us. Was this a confession, the admission of a master fantasist? Or was it the ultimate act of defiance, a coded message telling us that he didn't need to invent a new universe because he was far too busy documenting the ruins of the last one? Maybe the truth has been right there the whole time, etched into every single plate, just waiting for us to finally learn how to see.